The sounds of alien laughter filled the massive space station that orbited the dead planet Nexus Prime inside the council chamber. Dozens of different alien species sat around a curved table that stretched for nearly a mile. Each species looked different from the others. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of crystal or metal. At the center of the table stood General Vexstar. His body was made of what looked like living crystal that changed colors when he moved. He was tall, almost 10 feet, and his voice sounded like breaking glass when he spoke. In his hands, he held a small device that showed moving pictures in the air above it. The pictures showed a green and blue planet, Earth. The images focused on thick forests with huge trees, deep rivers and mountains covered with snow. To the aliens watching, it looked wild and messy. "Look at this," General Vexstar said, his crystal body flashing red with what his species showed when they felt superior to others. "This is what the humans call their homeworld. See how much of it is still covered with wild plants and animals. Any smart species would have cut down all these trees and built proper cities by now." Commander Throck clicked his sharp teeth together. He looked like a giant ant that walked on 2 legs. His black eyes reflected the light as he studied the pictures. "Our spy ships have been watching them for months. The humans actually choose to live near these wild places. Some of them even go into the forest just for fun. How can such a backward species pose any threat to us?" Admiral Keshra made a bubbling sound that was laughter for her species. She lived underwater on her home planet and needed a special suit filled with water to survive in the station's air. Through the clear mask covering her fish-like face, her gills moved as she breathed the liquid. "Look at how much space they waste. Our computers show that over 30% of their planet is still covered with forests, mountains, and swamps. A proper civilization would have turned all of that into useful buildings and factories." The other alien commanders around the table made their own sounds of agreement. There were the Flame Walkers, whose bodies glowed like living fire. The Stone Crushers, who looked like walking rocks with arms and legs. The Sky Riders, whose thin bodies and large wings let them fly through space without ships. All of them had one thing in common. They thought humans were weak and stupid. "The humans have been sending us messages," said General Vexstar. He pressed a button on his device and a new image appeared. It showed a human man in a green uniform standing in front of trees. "They say they want to talk about peace. They think they can negotiate with us." More alien laughter filled the chamber. Commander Throke's mandibles clicked faster. "Peace? They should be grateful we are giving them the chance to surrender. Any other species this primitive would have been destroyed without warning. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours," added Admiral Keshra. "Their fastest ships cannot even leave their own solar system. Their weapons are still based on chemical explosions. They are like children playing with sticks while we carry the power of stars." General Vexstar nodded and put away his device. "The Council has already decided what will happen. We will give them 1 day to surrender completely. If they refuse, we will show them our power by destroying their precious wild lands first. Once they see how easily we can eliminate what they value most, they will beg us to accept their surrender." The aliens began to leave the chamber, each group talking among themselves about how easy this conquest would be. They had conquered hundreds of worlds before. Some planets had put up fierce fights with advanced weapons and strong armies. Others had surrendered immediately when they saw the alien fleets arrive, but never had they faced a species that seemed so attached to wild, uncontrolled nature. As the aliens planned their easy victory, none of them noticed the small device hidden in the chamber's wall. It looked like just another piece of the station's construction, but it was actually a human listening device. For months, it had been recording everything the aliens said. The signal from the device traveled across space, moving faster than light through special communication channels that the aliens did not know humans had discovered. It reached Earth in less than an hour. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, Colonel Jake Martinez sat in a room carved out of solid rock. The room was part of a secret military base that most people did not know existed. Jake was 45 years old with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. He had been a Green Beret for 20 years before taking this. New job. The message appeared on his computer screen. As he read it, his face showed no emotion, but his hands clenched into fists. He pressed a button on his desk. "Brooks, get in here," he said. Lieutenant Amy Brooks entered the room 2 minutes later. She was 30 years old with brown hair tied back in a military style. She had been a Marine Force recon specialist before joining Jake's special unit. For the past 6 months, she had been tracking strange readings in Earth's atmosphere that suggested alien ships were watching them. "Sir?" she said, standing at attention. Jake turned his computer screen so she could read the message. "It's confirmed. The aliens are real, and they're coming. They think we're going to be an easy target because we still have forests and mountains instead of covering everything with cities." Amy read the message quickly. Her training had taught her to stay calm in dangerous situations, but her heart beat faster as she understood what was about to happen. "How long do we have?" "They're giving us 1 day to surrender," Jake said. "After that, they plan to attack our wilderness areas first. They think that will break our spirit." Amy smiled. "They're going to attack our wilderness areas first?" "That's what they said. They think our forests and mountains are our weak points." Jake stood up and walked to a map on the wall. The map showed locations all over the world, each marked with different colored pins. "They have no idea what they're walking into." Jake had spent 15 years training soldiers to fight in every type of terrain Earth had to offer. He had taught men and women to survive in deserts, jungles, mountains, and frozen wastelands. He had worked with experts from every country, learning fighting techniques that had been passed down for thousands of years. "Sir, should we contact the other teams?" Amy asked. She knew that similar bases existed in remote locations all over the world. Each one was staffed by elite soldiers who specialized in fighting in different environments. "Already done," Jake said. "I sent the message to all of them as soon as I finished reading it. By now, every wilderness warfare specialist on the planet knows what's coming." Jake walked to a window that looked out over the mountains. The trees were just starting to change colors as autumn arrived. To most people, it looked like a peaceful forest. To Jake, it looked like the most sophisticated defense system ever created. "The aliens think we're primitive because we still have wild places," he said. "They don't understand that those wild places are exactly why we're going to win." Amy joined him at the window. She had grown up in these mountains before joining the military. She knew every trail, every cave, and every hidden valley for 50 miles in any direction. "What are your orders, sir?" Jake smiled for the first time since receiving the message. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just learned that his prey was walking into a trap. "Send a message to all units," he said. "Tell them to prepare for visitors. The aliens want to see what our wilderness can do. Let's show them." As night fell over the mountains, lights began appearing in hidden locations all over the world. In the Amazon rainforest, the Congo Basin, the Siberian wilderness, and dozens of other remote locations, elite soldiers prepared for a war unlike any that had ever been fought. They cleaned their weapons, checked their equipment, and waited. The aliens thought they were about to conquer a primitive planet. They had no idea they were about to face an enemy that had spent millions of years learning to use the wilderness as a weapon. The first alien ships appeared in Earth's sky at dawn. They were huge, bigger than any building humans had ever made. Each ship was over a mile long and half a mile wide. Their metal surfaces were so polished they looked like mirrors floating in the air. The ships moved without making any sound, hovering over major cities around the world. People stopped what they were doing and looked up. In New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other cities, millions of humans stood in the streets and watched the alien vessels. Some people screamed. Others took pictures with their phones. Most just stared in shock. The ships had been visible for exactly 1 hour when the message began broadcasting on every television, radio, and computer on Earth. The voice that spoke was artificial. created by alien computers that had learned human languages by listening to Earth's radio signals. For months, "People of Earth," the voice said in perfect English, then repeated the same words in hundreds of other languages. "We are the Galactic Council. Your planet has been selected for integration into our empire. You have 24 hours to surrender. Completely. All human governments must agree to our terms, or we will demonstrate why resistance is pointless." The message continued for 10 minutes, listing the aliens' demands. Humans would become workers in the Galactic Empire. Earth's resources would be harvested for alien use. Human technology would be destroyed and replaced with alien systems. Most importantly, all of Earth's wild areas would be cleared and developed into proper cities and factories. When the message ended, the ships simply waited. They hung in the sky like giant metal clouds, silent and threatening. In the hidden command center in the Appalachian Mountains, Colonel Jake Martinez watched the news reports on multiple screens. Every major government on Earth was in emergency session. Military leaders were trying to figure out how to fight enemies whose technology was so advanced it seemed magical. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Brooks said as she entered the command center, "we're receiving reports from observation posts around the world. The aliens have positioned ships over every major population center, but they're also moving smaller vessels toward wilderness areas." Jake nodded. This was exactly what the intercepted alien communications had predicted. "How long before they start landing?" "Our satellites are tracking approximately 200 smaller ships breaking away from the main fleet. They're heading for the Amazon, the Congo, the Rockies, Siberia, and other remote locations. At their current speed, they'll begin landing operations in 6 hours." Jake activated the communication system that connected him to similar hidden bases around the world. Within minutes, he was speaking to elite soldiers in every major wilderness area on the planet. "This is Mountain Base to all units," he said. "Confirmed alien landing operations beginning in 6 hours. All teams proceed to final positions. Remember, they think they're attacking our weakest points. Let's show them how wrong they are." The responses came from around the globe. "Amazon base ready. Congo base in position. Siberian base standing by." Each base was staffed by the most experienced wilderness fighters their countries could provide. Meanwhile, in space above Earth, General Vextar stood on the bridge of his command ship. Through the massive windows, he could see the blue and green planet below. To him, it looked like a garden that had been left untended for too long. "Status report," he commanded. Commander Throck approached, his insect-like legs clicking on the metal floor. "All landing forces are prepared. We have selected the most primitive areas of the planet for our initial demonstrations. The Amazon forest, the African jungles, the North American mountains, and the Asian wilderness regions." "Excellent," General Vextar said, his crystal body glowing with satisfaction. "Once we clear these useless wild areas, the humans will see that their attachment to primitive nature is pointless. They will surrender rather than watch us destroy the rest of their undeveloped lands." Admiral Keshra floated nearby in her water-filled movement suit. "Our tactical analysis suggests the operation will be complete within 3 days. Human military forces are concentrated around their cities. These wilderness areas are defended by nothing but wild animals and perhaps a few scattered human settlements." 6 hours later, the alien landings began. Ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their energy shields glowing. As they pushed through the air, each landing force consisted of 50 alien warriors equipped with the most advanced weapons their civilizations could produce. In the Amazon rainforest, General Vextar personally led the first assault. His crystal warriors cut through the jungle like a knife through paper. Their energy weapons burned away trees and vines, creating wide paths through the dense vegetation. Any animals that didn't flee were instantly killed by the heat beams. "Resistance is non-existent," reported Captain Victor, one of Vextar's subordinates. "We have encountered no organized human forces. Only a few scattered dwellings with terrified occupants." "As expected," General Vextar replied. "Continue the advance." Clear a zone 10 miles wide. We will show the humans what happens to those who cling to primitive ways. But the aliens were not the only ones moving through the jungle. High in the trees, invisible to the alien sensors, Sergeant Pete Collins watched the invaders advance. Pete was 38 years old and had spent 5 years in the Amazon training with indigenous tribes. He knew the jungle better than most people knew their own homes. Pete spoke quietly into his radio headset. Alpha Team, this is Ghost 1. Targets are advancing through Sector 7. Count 50 hostiles with energy weapons. They're burning everything in their path. The response came from Lieutenant Maria Santos, a former Army Ranger who was positioned 2 miles to the north. Copy, Ghost 1. Bravo Team is in position. Waiting for your signal. Pete smiled as he watched the aliens below. They were walking in formation like soldiers marching in a parade. They made no effort to move quietly or avoid detection. Why would they? Their sensors showed no threats, and their weapons could destroy anything they encountered. What their sensors couldn't detect were the humans who had been preparing for weeks. Pete and his team had spent months learning every inch of this part of the jungle. They knew which trees would fall in which direction. They knew where the ground was soft and where it was firm. They knew which plants were dangerous and which ones were safe. Most importantly, they knew how to be invisible. The alien advance continued for 2 hours. They had burned a path 3 miles into the jungle when the first trap was triggered. Crystal Warrior stepped on what looked like solid ground and immediately sank up to his waist in mud. The spot had been a firm riverbank until Pete's team had diverted a stream 2 days earlier, turning the area into a hidden swamp. As the warrior struggled to free himself, vines began wrapping around his arms and legs. These were not ordinary vines. They had been treated with a chemical that made them contract when exposed to the energy emissions from alien weapons. The more the warrior fired his weapon trying to cut the vines, the tighter they squeezed. What is happening? General Vextar demanded as he watched his soldier disappear beneath the surface of the mud before anyone could answer. The attack began in earnest. Arrows flew from the trees, each one tipped with a poison that had been extracted from local frogs. The aliens' energy shields protected them from most projectiles, but these arrows were made from a wood that absorbed energy instead of being destroyed by it. Captain Ziegler raised his weapon to fire into the trees, but a heavy net dropped from above, tangling his arms and legs. As he struggled to free himself, more nets fell from other directions. Within seconds, half the alien force was trapped. "Impossible," General Vextar shouted. "Our sensors show no human technology in this area." He was right. There was no human technology. There were only humans who had learned to use the jungle itself as a weapon. Every trap, every attack, every defense had been created using nothing but materials found in the forest and knowledge passed down through generations of indigenous hunters. Similar scenes were playing out in wilderness areas around the world. In the Rocky Mountains, Staff Sergeant Lisa Chun used her knowledge of mountain weather to trigger an avalanche that buried an entire alien landing force. In the Congo, Captain Danny Rodriguez coordinated with local tribes to turn the river system into a maze of dead ends and killing zones. The aliens had expected to face primitive humans with simple weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could turn the environment itself against them. Trees fell at exactly the right moment to crush alien vehicles. Rivers changed course to flood alien camps. Even the animals seemed to be working against them, as if the entire ecosystem had declared war. By the end of the first day, the alien commanders were receiving reports they could barely believe. Landing forces that should have cleared hundreds of square miles had been stopped cold. Some had been completely wiped out. Others were trapped in small defensive positions, unable to advance or retreat. How is this possible? Admiral Keshra asked during an emergency command meeting. These are primitive wilderness areas. There should be nothing here but plants and animals. General Vextar studied the tactical displays, his crystal body flickering with confusion and anger. The humans are not fighting like any civilized species we have encountered. 1 week had passed since the alien invasion began. and the reports reaching the Galactic Council's command ships painted a picture that none of the alien commanders wanted to believe. What should have been the easiest conquest in their history had turned into a nightmare of disappearing soldiers and failed missions. General Vextar stood in his command center, his crystal body flickering between red and black as he tried to understand the casualty reports. On the holographic display in front of him, red dots showed the locations where alien forces had gone missing. There were hundreds of them, scattered across every wilderness area on Earth. "Explain this to me again," he said to Commander Throck, who was nervously clicking his mandibles as he reviewed the data. "In the past 7 days, we have lost contact with 60% of our ground forces," Throck reported. "Some simply stopped responding to communications. Others sent distress signals before going silent. A few managed to transmit video footage before their equipment was destroyed." "Show me the footage," General Vextar commanded. The holographic display changed to show a recording from a Crystal Warrior's helmet camera. The warrior was walking through a dense forest with his squad when suddenly the ground gave way beneath his feet. He fell into a pit that was perfectly camouflaged with branches and leaves. As he looked up, trying to climb out, sharpened wooden spikes shot out from the walls of the pit. The recording ended abruptly. "Primitive traps," Admiral Keshra said dismissively. "Surely our technology can detect such simple devices." "That is what we thought," Commander Throck replied. "But watch this next recording." The second video showed a squad of insectoid warriors from Throck's own species. They were using advanced scanning equipment to check for traps as they moved through a swamp. Their scanners showed the area was safe, but when they stepped onto what appeared to be solid ground, they immediately sank into quicksand that their scanners had not detected. As the warriors struggled to escape, human figures emerged from the water around them. The humans were covered in mud and plants, making them invisible to the alien sensors. They moved through the swamp like they belonged there, breathing through hollow reeds and moving silently through water that came up to their necks. The aliens tried to use their energy weapons, but the weapons malfunctioned when water got into their power systems. Within minutes, all 6 alien warriors had been pulled under the surface and drowned. "How are our sensors being fooled?" General Vextar asked. "Our technology should be able to detect any trap or ambush." "The humans are not using technology," Commander Throck explained. "They are using the natural environment in ways we never considered. They dig pits and cover them with real plants that look normal to our scanners. They create quicksand by redirecting underground water sources. They train wild animals to attack our forces on command." Admiral Keshra Eskills fluttered with agitation inside her water suit. "You are telling me that primitives with no advanced weapons are defeating our elite warriors?" "Not just defeating them," Throck said quietly, "hunting them." In the Amazon rainforest, Sergeant Pete Collins moved through the trees like a ghost. He had been tracking an alien patrol for 3 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Behind him, 5 other human soldiers followed, each one trained in jungle warfare and survival techniques that had been passed down for generations. Pete held up his hand, signaling the others to stop. Below them, 6 crystal warriors were setting up a camp in a small clearing. They had chosen the spot because it gave them clear sight lines in all directions and seemed defensible. What they did not know was that Pete had been guiding them to this exact location for the past 2 days. Every time the alien patrol had tried to go in a different direction, they had encountered obstacles. Fallen trees blocked their path. Swarms of insects drove them away from certain areas. Strange sounds in the jungle made them change course. The aliens thought they were making their own decisions about where to go. In reality, Pete was herding them like sheep toward a killing ground that he and his team had spent a week preparing. Pete spoke quietly into his radio. "Ghost Team, this is Ghost 1. Targets are in the box. Begin Phase 1. High above the clearing." Corporal Jenny Martinez began cutting through a rope that held a massive log suspended between 2 trees. The log had been positioned weeks earlier, disguised to look like a natural part of the forest canopy. When the rope snapped, the log would swing down like a giant hammer. At the same time, Specialist Rick Thompson was removing the supports from a beaver dam upstream from the clearing. When the dam collapsed, thousands of gallons of water would flood the clearing, turning the solid ground into a muddy trap. The third member of the team, Sergeant Carlos Rivera, was preparing his own surprise. He had spent days training a family of jaguars using techniques learned from local hunters. The big cats were not pets or tame animals. They were wild predators that had learned to associate the scent of alien technology with food rewards. Pete counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. The attack began with the sound of rushing water as the beaver dam collapsed. The alien warriors looked up in alarm as a wall of muddy water crashed into their camp. Before they could react, the massive log swung down from above, smashing their energy shields and knocking 3 of them to the ground. As the aliens struggled to stand up in the knee-deep mud, the jaguars attacked from 3 different directions. The big cats moved like liquid lightning, their claws easily piercing alien armor that was designed to stop energy weapons, but not the teeth and claws of Earth's apex predators. The entire fight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, Pete and his team emerged from the jungle to collect the alien weapons and equipment. They would study the technology and learn how to use it against its makers. Ghost 1 to Mountain Base, Pete reported over his radio. Package delivered, 6 targets eliminated, no human casualties. Similar reports were coming in from wilderness areas around the world. In the Rocky Mountains, Staff Sergeant Lisa Chun had perfected the art of using avalanches as weapons. She could trigger a controlled landslide that would bury alien forces while leaving escape routes for her own people. The key is understanding how snow and rock want to move, she explained to her team as they prepared their next ambush. We don't fight against the mountain. We convince the mountain to fight for us. Lisa's latest target was an alien base that had been established in what the aliens thought was a secure valley. They had set up their camp at the bottom of the valley, surrounded by steep walls that would protect them from ground attack. What they did not realize was that Lisa and her mountain warfare specialists had been above them for days, carefully placing small explosive charges at key points on the valley walls. The charges were made from materials found in old mining equipment, disguised to look like natural rock formations. When Lisa triggered the avalanche, it started small. A few rocks fell from one wall of the valley. Then more rocks fell from the opposite wall. Within minutes, the entire valley was filled with a roaring cascade of stone and snow that buried the alien base under 50 feet of debris. But the most devastating attacks were happening in Earth's oceans and coastal areas. Chief Petty Officer Ben Carter had spent 12 years as a Navy diver before joining a special program that studied communication between humans and marine animals. Now he was using everything he had learned to turn the oceans into an alien graveyard. The dolphins were the first to understand. Ben explained to his team as they prepared for an underwater assault on an alien submarine base. They're smart enough to recognize tactical situations. When I showed them what the aliens were doing to the forests and mountains, they decided to help. Ben's team included both human divers and dolphins that had been trained in coordinated attack strategies. The dolphins could communicate with whales across hundreds of miles of ocean, creating an intelligence network that gave the humans real-time information about alien movements. The alien submarine base was built on the ocean floor, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. The aliens thought they were safe underwater. Far from the primitive humans who lived on the surface, they were wrong. The attack began when a pod of whales approached the base from the north, making loud calls that distracted the alien sensors. While the aliens focused on the whales, Ben and his team approached from the south, riding on the backs of giant manta rays that moved silently through the water. The dolphins attacked first, using their sonar to confuse the alien navigation systems. Then the human divers placed explosive charges on the base's support structures. Finally, a group of trained octopi slipped through the base's defensive barriers and began tearing apart the alien equipment with their powerful tentacles. The aliens inside the base never had a chance to call for help. Their communication equipment was destroyed by the octopi. Their escape routes were blocked by debris from the explosions. and their energy shields failed when exposed to the intense pressure of the deep ocean. Back in space, the alien commanders were beginning to realize that they were not fighting a primitive species. They were fighting something much more dangerous, a species that had learned to work with their environment instead of against it. "We need to change our strategy, General," Vexstar announced during an emergency meeting. 3 weeks had passed since the alien invasion began, and the reports reaching the Galactic Council were unlike anything in their military history. Elite alien forces were not just being defeated, they were disappearing without a trace, as if the Earth itself was swallowing them whole. Admiral Keshra floated in her water-filled command chamber, studying footage that made no sense to her advanced mind. The video showed one of her deep-sea combat units approaching what appeared to be an empty underwater cave. The unit consisted of 12 of her best warriors, each equipped with weapons that could cut through solid metal and armor that could withstand the pressure of the deepest ocean trenches. The warriors entered the cave in perfect formation, their lights cutting through the dark water. For 5 minutes, everything appeared normal. Then the lights began going out one by one. The last warrior to survive managed to turn his camera toward his attacker before the recording ended. What Keshra saw made her gills flutter with disbelief. The creature attacking her warrior looked like a human, but one that moved through the water like it belonged there. The human was riding on the back of a massive octopus, and behind him came a coordinated group of sharks, dolphins, and other sea creatures that seemed to be following his commands. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself. "Humans cannot breathe underwater. They cannot survive at these depths. They cannot command sea creatures like some primitive sea god." But the evidence was right in front of her. Somehow, the humans had learned to work with Earth's ocean life in ways that her advanced technology could not detect or understand. Chief Petty Officer Ben Carter surfaced quietly near the alien underwater base, breathing through a special apparatus that had been developed by combining human technology with techniques learned from studying how marine mammals manage oxygen. Around him, his team of human divers and marine animal partners prepared for their most ambitious attack yet. "Remember," Ben whispered to his team through the underwater communication system, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. Every whale, dolphin, and shark in these waters is counting on us to drive out the invaders." The alien base below them was massive, a metal structure that stretched across the ocean floor like an underwater city. It housed over 300 alien warriors and was protected by energy shields that could stop any known weapon. The aliens inside believed they were completely safe. They had no idea that Ben's team had spent 2 weeks studying the base's construction, with the help of creatures that the aliens never considered threats. Tiny fish had swum through the base's water intake systems, mapping the internal layout. Eels had tested the electrical systems, finding weak points that could be exploited. Even jellyfish had been used as living sensors, their bodies detecting energy patterns that human instruments could not measure. "Phase 1 begin," Ben commanded. The attack started from below. Giant squids, guided by human handlers, wrapped their tentacles around the base's support pillars. These were not ordinary squids, but creatures from the deepest parts of the ocean that had been lured to the surface by a combination of bioluminescent signals and chemical attractants that marine biologists had been studying for years. As the squids began crushing the support structure, schools of electric eels moved toward the base's power systems. The eels had been trained using positive reinforcement techniques to recognize the specific electromagnetic signature of alien technology. When they discharged their electricity in coordinated groups, they created power surges that overloaded the aliens' defensive systems. The energy shields protecting the base flickered and died. Immediately, Ben's human divers moved in, guided by dolphins that used their natural sonar to navigate through the now dark structure. The humans carried weapons that had been specifically designed for underwater combat. But they also carried something more dangerous: detailed knowledge of every weak point in the alien base. The aliens inside the base found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their defensive systems better than they did. Human divers appeared in sections of the base that should have been impossible to reach. Marine creatures attacked from directions that the aliens had never considered. Threats. Within an hour, the entire base had been destroyed from the inside out. Meanwhile, in the Amazon rainforest, Captain Steve Parker was preparing for what would become known as the Ghost River Campaign. Steve had spent 5 years working with indigenous tribes, learning hunting and survival techniques that had been passed down for thousands of years. Now he was combining that ancient knowledge with modern military tactics to create something entirely new. The aliens think the jungle is chaotic, Steve explained to his mixed team of green berets and tribal warriors. They see the trees and vines and animals as random obstacles. But we know better. Everything in this forest is connected. Every plant, every animal, every drop of water is part of a system that has been working together for millions of years. Steve's plan was ambitious beyond anything attempted before. Instead of just using the jungle to hide from the aliens, he was going to turn the jungle itself into a weapon. Working with botanists and biologists, his team had developed ways to modify the forest's natural processes to respond to human commands. Certain trees had been treated with chemicals that made them grow faster when exposed to specific pheromones that humans could release. Vines were trained to grow in particular directions by using light and nutrient guides. Even the insects and birds were being recruited as scouts and messengers through techniques that combined scientific knowledge with traditional animal communication. Methods that indigenous hunters had used for centuries. The alien force advancing through this section of the Amazon consisted of over 200 crystal warriors, led by General Vextar himself. They had come to establish a permanent base and show the humans that nowhere on Earth was safe from alien control. They had been walking for 3 hours when the forest began to change around them. At first, it was subtle. Vines seemed to grow across their path just after they had passed. Tree branches shifted to block their retreat routes. Flowers opened and released pollen that made their sensors malfunction. "Something is wrong," Captain Ziegler reported to General Vextar. "The jungle is behaving strangely. Our path back to the landing site has become blocked by vegetation that was not there an hour ago." General Vextar's crystal body flickered with irritation. "Plant life cannot move that quickly. Your sensors must be malfunctioning." But as they continued forward, the changes became impossible to ignore. Trees began bending toward them, their branches reaching down like giant arms. Roots erupted from the ground, creating barriers that forced the aliens to change direction. The very ground beneath their feet became soft and unstable, as if the earth itself was rejecting their presence. "Sir," Ziegler said nervously, "I recommend we retreat immediately. This is not natural behavior for plant life." Before General Vextar could respond, the attack began. But it was unlike any attack they had faced before. The forest itself seemed to come alive. Vines shot out from every direction, wrapping around alien weapons and dragging them away. Trees dropped massive seed pods that exploded like grenades. When they hit the ground, clouds of spores filled the air, causing the aliens' breathing apparatus to clog and fail. The aliens tried to fight back, but their energy weapons were useless against targets that could regrow faster than they could be destroyed. Every tree they cut down was replaced by 3 more. Every vine they burned was replaced by a dozen others. The jungle was healing itself faster than they could damage it. Hidden throughout the forest, Steve's team coordinated the attack using communication methods that would have seemed magical to anyone who did not understand the science behind them. They released chemical signals that triggered specific responses from modified plants. They used animal calls to direct the movement of trained insects and birds. They even used the forest's own root network as a communication system, sending signals through underground connections between trees. "Target Group Alpha is surrounded," reported Sergeant Linda Hayes over the Natural Communication Network. "Initiating Phase 2. Phase 2 involved the predators. Jaguars, trained using techniques that combined modern animal psychology with ancient hunting traditions, began stalking the aliens through the undergrowth. These big cats had learned to recognize alien technology as a threat and alien warriors as prey. But the jaguars were not alone. Poisonous snakes dropped from the trees, their venom specifically chosen for its effect on alien physiology. Clouds of insects, guided by human handlers using pheromone trails, swarmed over the aliens in coordinated waves that overwhelmed their defensive systems. In the mountains of Colorado, Major Kate Thompson was perfecting her own form of environmental warfare. Kate had spent 10 years studying avalanche patterns and weather modification techniques. Now she was using that knowledge to turn the mountains themselves into weapons. The aliens choose high ground because they think it gives them a tactical advantage, she explained to her team as they prepared their assault on an alien mountain base. What they don't understand is that mountains are not static. They are constantly changing, constantly moving. We just need to convince them to move a little faster. 6 months had passed since the alien invasion began, and the Galactic Council was facing a reality that shattered everything they thought they knew about warfare. Of the 7 major alien military forces that had confidently descended to Earth's surface, only scattered remnants remained. The rest had simply vanished into the wilderness, swallowed by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. In the command ship orbiting Earth, General Vextar stood before a holographic map that showed the current state of the invasion. Red zones marked areas where alien forces had been completely eliminated. Yellow zones showed locations where alien troops were trapped and unable to advance or retreat. Green zones indicated the few remaining areas where aliens maintained any control at all. The map was almost entirely red. "This is impossible," Admiral Keshra said, her voice bubbling with disbelief through her water-filled suit. "We brought enough firepower to conquer 100 worlds. How can a single primitive planet have defeated us so completely?" "Commander." Throke's mandibles clicked nervously as he studied the tactical reports. "Admiral, I do not believe we are fighting a primitive planet. The coordination we have observed suggests a level of strategic thinking that surpasses our own military doctrine." General Vextar's crystal body flickered between colors as he processed the data. In 6 months of warfare, his forces had learned terrible truths about their enemy. The humans did not just live on Earth, they were part of Earth. Every forest, every mountain, every river and ocean had become an extension of human consciousness. "Show them the satellite footage from Sector 7, Vextar commanded. The holographic display changed to show an aerial view of what had once been an alien supply depot in the Canadian wilderness. The depot had been built to resupply alien forces operating in North America. It had been protected by energy shields, automated defenses, and a garrison of 200 elite warriors. The footage showed what the depot looked like now. The metal buildings had been completely covered by fast-growing vines that seemed to dissolve alien materials while leaving natural substances untouched. Trees had grown through the structures in patterns that were too organized to be natural. The entire complex looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, even though it had been operational just 2 weeks earlier. "Our xenobiologists cannot explain how plant life can grow this rapidly," Commander Throck reported. "The vines appear to have been genetically modified, but not with any technology we recognize. It is as if the humans have learned to speak to the plants directly, convincing them to change their nature." What the aliens could not understand was that this was exactly what had happened. Major Eric Davis, a former Army engineer, had spent 3 years working with botanical specialists to develop what they called biological warfare integration. By combining traditional plant breeding techniques with chemical signals that mimicked natural growth hormones, human teams could convince plants to grow in specific patterns and directions. "We are not modifying the plants," Eric had explained to his team months earlier. "We are asking them to help us and showing them how to do it." The technique had been tested in small areas before the invasion, but the alien attack had provided the perfect opportunity to deploy it on a massive scale. Across North America, forests were actively growing over alien installations, dissolving metal structures and incorporating them into the ecosystem. Meanwhile, in the ruins of what had been General Vextar's Amazon command post, Captain Steve Parker surveyed the aftermath of the Ghost River campaign. The alien base that had once housed 500 crystal warriors was now completely invisible, hidden beneath a canopy of trees that had grown to enormous size in just 6 months. Ghost base to Mountain Command, Steve reported over his communication system. Sector 12 is now completely integrated. No alien technology remains functional. The forest has accepted all human personnel as part of its ecosystem. This was the most remarkable development of the entire war. Human soldiers who had spent months living and fighting in modified wilderness areas were beginning to change. They moved through forests without disturbing a single leaf. They could predict weather patterns days in advance. They seemed to know where animals would be before the animals themselves made the decision to move. "We are not becoming the forest," Steve had written in his latest report. "We are remembering that we were always part of it." In space above Earth, the alien commanders were coming to a similar conclusion. Admiral Keshra studied reports from her underwater reconnaissance teams with growing horror. Her deep-sea warriors, equipped with technology that could function in the crushing depths of gas-giant oceans, were being systematically hunted by humans who move through water like natural sea creatures. "They are not using breathing apparatus," her science officer reported. "Our sensors show that these humans are somehow extracting oxygen directly from the water like fish. This should be biologically impossible for their species." But Chief Petty Officer Ben Carter and his marine warfare teams had discovered something that the aliens' advanced science could not explain. After months of working closely with dolphins and whales, some humans were developing the ability to hold their breath for over an hour and dive to depths that should have killed them. "The dolphins are teaching us," Ben had reported to his superiors. "Not just tactics and techniques, but actual physical changes. Our bodies are adapting to work with theirs." Similar changes were happening to human soldiers around the world. Mountain warfare specialists like Major Kate Thompson found that they could predict avalanches and earthquakes with uncanny accuracy. Jungle fighters like Pete Collins could move through dense vegetation without making a sound, and animals would approach them without fear. The aliens had assumed they were fighting a species that used technology to overcome the limitations of their biology. Instead, they had discovered a species that was evolving in real time, guided by an intelligence that encompassed entire ecosystems. General Vextar made his final decision as reports arrived of another catastrophic defeat. An alien fleet attempting to establish an orbital bombardment position had been destroyed by what appeared to be controlled lightning strikes launched from mountain peaks. Human teams had somehow learned to direct electrical storms with precision that exceeded the aliens' most advanced targeting systems. "Contact the human leadership," he ordered. "We will discuss terms." The response came within hours, transmitted from Colonel Jake Martinez's command center deep in the Appalachian Mountains. But the terms offered were not what the aliens expected. "We have reviewed your request for negotiations," Jake's message began. "However, we believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of this conflict." Jake sat in his command center, surrounded by screens showing the status of human forces around the world. But unlike the beginning of the war, many of those forces were no longer entirely human. They had become something new, something that existed at the intersection between human consciousness and natural systems. "You came here believing that our wilderness areas were our weakness," Jake continued in his message to the alien fleet. "You thought that our connection to nature made U.S. primitive and easy to defeat. You were wrong on both counts." Lieutenant Amy Brooks, now promoted to major for her role in coordinating global communications, stood beside Jake as he delivered humanity's ultimatum. "Our forests, mountains, and oceans are not just where we live. They are our technology. They are military infrastructure. They are our consciousness extended across an entire planet." The message continued with terms that the aliens found almost impossible to believe. Complete withdrawal from Earth's solar system within 72 hours. Reparations for environmental damage caused by the invasion. And most shocking of all, A formal acknowledgement that Earth's ecosystem-integrated civilization represented a form of technology more advanced than anything in the Galactic Council's empire. "This is ridiculous," Admiral Keshra protested when she heard the terms. "How can we acknowledge that primitive wilderness is more advanced than our science?" "Because it is," General Vextar replied quietly. His crystal body had lost its bright coloration and now appeared dull and cracked. "We measure advancement by how much control we have over our environment. We build machines to overcome natural limitations. We replace biological systems with artificial ones." He gestured toward the image of Earth on the main display. From space, the planet looked different than it had 6 months earlier. The wilderness area seemed more organized, more purposeful. Weather patterns moved in spirals that suggested conscious control. Even the ocean currents appeared to be flowing in coordinated patterns. "The humans took a different path," Vextar continued. "Instead of conquering their environment, they became part of it. Instead of replacing natural systems, they learned to enhance them. What we dismissed as primitive wilderness is actually the most sophisticated defense network ever created." Commander Throck studied the tactical analysis one final time. "Sir, if we refuse their terms and attempt to continue the invasion, what are our chances of success?" Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Then his crystal body flickered with what his species displayed when facing absolute defeat. "0. We are not fighting humans anymore."